Hello, my name is Glenn Martin, and I am one of the coaches of the UCF programming team. In this video, I will be covering the system details for the 2020 UCF Local Programming Contest. Before I dig in too deeply, I want to point out that there is also a Part 1 video that was recorded by Dr. Ali Ruji that covers the general concepts of the competition itself. This video covers only the system details, so please be sure to watch both videos. All right, let's dig in. So in previous years, our UCF Local Programming Contest would typically consist of an in-person practice round, orientation round on one Saturday, followed by our actual tryout competition the following Saturday. Due to COVID-19, we're altering this approach into a multiple round approach where they will all take place online and you will be participating from your home. So the very first round is Saturday, August 29th, beginning at 2 p.m. And this is simply a practice round or orientation round where you can connect into the system, see how everything will work. We have some problems there for you to solve. And you can just try everything out and see what issues you might run into that might require clarification. The judges will be online for that afternoon. To answer clarifications as needed and monitor the contest itself. And then the round will remain open for several days afterwards. So you can continue to try things out if you need to. The results of this round do not count in any way. It's simply a way for you to try out the system. The actual first official round, round 1A, will take place on Saturday, September 5th from 2 to 6 p.m. The top roughly 30-ish people will be invited to the final round. If you do not make that selection, then there is, following Saturday, a round 1B on September 12th, very similar to 4 hours from 2 to 6 p.m. And again, an additional roughly 30 people will be invited to the final round. If you made the selection in round 1A, you are welcome to participate in 1B. But your scores will not be displayed on the official scoreboard. For all those selected, they will attend the final round, which will be held on Saturday, September 19th from 2 to 7 p.m. This round is a 5-hour round. And then these results will be used to form the team for the 2020 to 21 academic year. Okay, so basically the question becomes, well, how do you participate in these rounds? Well, it's very important that you have to register as compared to previous years where you might show up in our face-to-face competition. Obviously, online, we can't do that the same way. So we're requiring everybody to register online ahead of time. So you can simply go to this URL, ucf.pt/register. It will forward you to Google Forms to fill out. And then shortly before your first round of participation, about 2 or 3 days beforehand, you'll receive an email with the login information, including your username, password, and the contest site itself. You will not receive this each week. You will simply receive it before the very first round that you participate in. So please keep an eye out on your Knight's Mail for that information, because we will only send it to your Knight's Mail address. All right, the contest itself, each round will have anywhere between 6 and 15 problems, and you can work on them in any order. You're not required to go front to back or anything like that. If you find one that you'd rather work on in the middle somewhere, you're welcome to go jump to that one. Each round has a set amount of time, either 4 hours or 5 hours, depending on the round, and you can use one PC. And essentially, the way that this works is that whoever solves the most problem wins. If there's a tie, which is very common, they're broken by a system of penalty points where you receive 1 point for each minute since the beginning of that round for the problem until you've solved it, as well as 20 points for each extra judge run that you had. It's important to note that penalty points are not assessed for problems that are never solved. So only if you eventually solve a problem do you incur the penalty points for that problem. All right, so what can I do as part of participating in a given round? Well, you can create and edit files on your computer. You can test your program and make sure that you feel it's going to run effectively. You can ask clarification requests from the judges. So the judges will not entertain questions like, how do I solve this problem, or anything that is too specific to the solution. If you feel there's an ambiguity in the problem specification that the judges missed somehow, you can pose this request for a clarification and try to get that clarified. If the judges feel that, yes, it should be clarified, they will issue a response to you. If they feel that, no, the problem is clear, you may get the response of just literally, quote, no response, meaning the judges have no response to your clarification request. Some clarification requests are actually sent to all participants if they're considered a serious enough ambiguity that needs to be clarified. All right. So after that, if you feel like you've written your program and tested it and you're ready to submit it, you can also, of course, submit your solution to the judges for a judge run. You can submit only one file at a time, and it's important to note you should not give any prompts or anything, so don't print out like enter a value and things like that. Just read the numbers as the problem statement gives you, and we'll see one of those soon. It's important to note you read input from standard input or like from your keyboard, and you also send output to standard output like to your screen. We don't use files for input or output, okay? You are allowed to use any reference material you can find, including copying and pasting from such electronic material. Just be careful not to get help from others, and we'll go more into that in a minute. All right. So what can I not do? Well, you cannot use unofficial programming languages. So you'll be sending your source code to the judges for solutions. So the official languages for the competition are C, C++, Java, or Python. All right, in particular Python 3, and we'll go more into that in a later slide. You also cannot ask or receive direct help from others. Now, you are allowed to communicate with contest officials. Like I said, you can submit a clarification request on a problem to the judges, or if you're having technical problems, we have methods for you to contact us that I'll go over in a future slide. But you cannot talk to your friend or your roommate or any online question site to get help, all right? This is meant to be an individual contest in all of the rounds. And you can use published material you find on the internet, but we don't want you to get help from individuals directly on any problem, all right? And one of the ways that we're gonna try to help enforce this is by perhaps including a interview round after the final round, where maybe some additional problems will be posed to you in a more interview fashion, all right? So please just help us and follow these rules. We're kind of in unique circumstances this year with COVID-19. So let's, I'll keep it a good contest, all right? Okay, so for reaching us, if you have some technical problems, you can reach out in these different ways. I do want to point out that if it's a clarification request about a problem, these should be sent to the judges through the contest site, and we'll see that in a future slide on what that looks like. But if you have like a problem logging into the site or some other issue going on with the site, feel free to reach out to the technical side of the group. And there's a few ways that we have set up for that. Probably the best way is to email us at this ucfprogteam@gmail.com. We'll be monitoring that address. If you need something a little more interactive with us, we're going to open up a channel on this chat page. So you can go to tlk.io/UCFprogteam, and we'll be on there in a more of a chat fashion. It is a public chat, so anything you message will be seen by everybody on there. And we also have set up a Zoom meeting, so in case we need to show something on our screen or look at something on your screen, we'll hand out that link and be able to go on there and look at what we need to. Okay. So scoring, like I mentioned before, most problems solved wins, and ties are broken by the penalty points. As I mentioned before, no penalty points for problems not solved are included. So if you can submit something 14 times, and if you never get it, you don't receive any penalty points for it. As I mentioned earlier, you receive 1 penalty point for every minute since the beginning of the contest until the problem is solved. So if you start a problem at 3 hours in, you're immediately already starting out at 180 penalty points. So it is from the beginning of the contest, okay? Sort of incentive to maybe do the easiest problems first kind of thing, because they're all essentially building up penalty points potentially. In addition, you also get 20 penalty points for each judge run except the last correct. So if you submit it 10 times, you will receive 20 penalty points for your previous 9 submissions, okay? Or 180 total just for the submissions, plus the time it took you to get it corrected, okay? All right, let's go into the systems themselves. So normally we would have this competition in person. We'd set up the labs with various environments for you to use. Obviously, you're working at home this year, so it's really up to your choice and what you install on your computer. For these different languages, we have recommendations here. So Jay, if you don't have any set up, you could potentially follow this. For Java, JGraphs is by far the easiest one to set up and use. You really can just load it up and start typing and click compile and run. It's a very simple environment. It's great for competitions. It's not necessarily the prettiest looking environment among these, but it's definitely the easiest to set up and use, and we highly recommend it. Judges will be using OpenJDK 11 for this competition. Okay. For C, C++, the simplest is code blocks, and it uses min.gw GCC. The judges will be using C11 and C++11 to judge your submissions. But again, code blocks are very simple to use. Again, you can just open the file and hit compile and run when you need to. For Python, there's fewer options. Python itself comes with the idle environment, which is a good, simple environment. PyCharm is another one that exists out there. It's a little much more complex to set up using projects and everything. So we would really recommend using Python idle if you're not familiar with anything else. The judges will be using Python 3.7.2 for this competition, and we do want to point out that we allow only Python 3. Python 2 submissions are not allowed. We'll be going more into that. Okay, so a few notes for C, C++. Make sure your main function ends with a return 0, so you're not returning some random error code that can throw off the judging environments. You know, can cause it to look like a runtime error happened or something. So be sure to return 0 out of your main. For Java, do not use packages. We require all submissions to just be in the default package. So the easiest way to make sure you do this is just don't use the package keyword in your source code. Just make sure it's not appearing anywhere in your submission. Okay, and then you'll be good to go. As I mentioned before, for Python, we're only supporting Python 3 only. So if you happen to submit a Python 2 submission, this will likely cause a runtime error, not a compile time error, since Python's interpreted. All right, so be careful with that and all these different notes. All right, let's go into the judging a little bit. So again, we mentioned the problem set will have 6 to 15 problems posed. You can work on them in any order. You do not have to get one correct to move on to the next one. So if you work on one for an hour and you just keep getting it wrong, you know, you can move on and go try another one if you feel like you need to, okay? The specifications themselves explain the problem, including how the input will be specified, and the judge input will follow that specification. And it also explains how your output should appear. And you should follow that specification to the letter, okay? Sample input and sample output are also provided as part of the specification. And again, you need to follow the output very closely and make sure you follow what it requires. All right, so here's an example on the right of a problem from last year's UCF Local Programming Contest. So you see at the top it has a problem title, and then it has a file name to use, in this case divide. And then for the UCF Local Programming Contest, the judges also gave an indication of where they feel in the difficulty level each problem is. So for this problem, the judges felt it was an easy problem as compared to a medium or hard problem. So in this case, you would name your solution based off this file name. So for example, for C, you would name it divide.c. For C++, you would name your file divide.cpp. For Java, divide.java, or Python, divide.py, okay? And again, your submission must be contained in this single file, all right? One note for Java is we do require all class names to be in lowercase. And then we know that's not always typical, so we call it out here. It just makes judging a whole lot easier and makes it more similar to all the other languages, okay? Again, I mentioned this before, but make sure you read input from standard in or the keyboard and don't give any prompts at all because it will throw off the judging of your solution. And then just output to the screen, you know, just like with simple print statements. And don't create a GUI or anything. Don't put any extra labels. Just output the text. So you see here on the specification on the right, the input just has a number of integers, no prompts, and then the output just has a number of answers, again, no prompts. Okay, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything extra. All right, for testing, you can and should test your program as much as you want on your computer. It's greatly encouraged, and you want to try to find all the issues that you might have. The sample input and sample output for each problem will be available electronically on this contest submission site. You can download them from there if you wish. As you're testing, you should think of all possible test cases that a problem specification might allow. You know, the judges do not necessarily write intentionally tricky cases, but there are, you know, many cases and some problems that have to be handled specially if you think through the problem statement themselves. So when you read a problem, think about whether there's any of those special cases that need to be checked, and maybe you need to handle them specially, because the judges certainly spend a fair amount of time thinking through what a problem specification allows or does not allow, and will make the judge input file fairly thorough, okay? So you want to make sure you test well, because the judges certainly will be, all right? So when the judges get your submission and go ahead and test it, the judges do use their own test data, okay? They don't use just the sample input and output as was given to you in the problem specification. But that judge data, again, is guaranteed to be valid according to the problem specification. It's just that there may be a special case or even a large case or something that can cause some issues. So you'll want to test them. And then when the judges run, they typically will redirect the input file in and then redirect your output to a file so they can do some judging of your output with their output. So we like to point this out just so you're aware that this is how the judges judge your program, okay? So this is the submission site itself that you'll go to. You'll log in with your username and password that will be emailed to you, as I stated earlier. Once you've logged in, you have a number of options available to you. Your status is where you can see all the responses to your submissions and clarification requests. Sample data is where you can see all the sample input and output from the problem specifications that we'll include here on the online system. When you're ready to submit, of course, you click Submit Solution, you choose the problem that you'll be using, and then you're attach your file to it and click Submit. For clarification, similarly, you pick what problem you want to ask a clarification about, and then you type up your clarification and send it to the judges, and then the judge will respond with some kind of response potentially that you'll see in the status page. And then again, that should be focused on problems themselves and whether there's some clarification request, you know, some ambiguity about the problem. It's not for, you know, asking how do I solve this problem kind of things, all right? And then lastly, you can see the score, which I'll show in a minute. And then we also include some online reference material for you to use. So if you just want to see some C, C++, or Java or Python reference material, we have it linked there for you. And then in the upper right here, where it says competition has not started, that is actually where the clock will be. So once the competition starts, you will see a countdown there of how much time remains. Very typically in the final hour or so of each round, we will what's called freeze the score. So while we will still give you responses as you submit, they will not appear on the scoreboard for everybody else to see. Okay, so this gives a little suspense on the final results. Okay, so here's what a scoreboard typically looks like. This is one from a high school competition we ran last year. So you can see you get multiple problems with different basic color-coded to balloons usually, and then you can see if something was judged wrong, it's in red. If it was judged correct, it's in green. Also, sometimes we highlight the first correct one that anybody did in the so-called dark green. Okay, so you can see some of that here. And this is what typically a score sheet will look like in the contest submission system. All right. So when you have submitted for a judge run, it honestly has to follow a number of criteria to get passed and judged correct. So of course it has to compile, right? And then after that, it actually has to execute successfully. So that means it doesn't, crash or doesn't lock up the machine. It also has to run completely, quickly enough. So every problem has a given time limit that should be posted on the problem itself. And your solution must must complete within that time limit, okay? Otherwise, if it's too slow, it will be judged incorrect. After that, of course, once it's all running completely and fast enough, the answers it generates has to be the correct answers, can't just be random numbers or whatnot. Then they also have to be in the proper format, okay? And then, of course, you also have to produce all of the output, all the answers. Okay, given that criteria, the judges will review your submission and give you one of the following responses. Correct means that have passed all the criteria and you have produced a solution that produces all output correctly and you have solved that problem. If you do not get it correct, you can get one of 5 incorrect responses. The first one, compile time error, means your program did not successfully compile at the judge's station for whatever reason. Sometimes it means that you have not did a final save at your computer before submitting, or it could be some other issue. Probably the only other issue that really comes up is sometimes we see some incompatibilities between Microsoft Visual Studio and the Code Blocks GCC compiler. So be a little careful with that. After that, your program could get a runtime error. So if your program crashed or otherwise terminated abnormally or locked up the judge's machine, you'll receive a runtime error response. If that doesn't happen, you could get time limit exceeded. This is where your program ran longer than the allowed time on the judge's machine. So the problem specifications will give time limits for how long each problem can run. So for example, if the time limit for a problem is 3 seconds, then your solution has to run in 3 seconds or less. If it goes over to 4 seconds, it will be declared time limit exceeded. Okay, if your program runs fast enough and generates answers, then the judges will generally start looking at those answers and make sure it matches with the expected judge answers. If there's any output that does not match, so if the judges feel the answer was 5 and you output 3, then you will get this response, wrong answer. Okay, and then you have to try to figure out why. The judges will not tell you what the case you missed. Even if you ask a clarification request, they will not ask what or answer what case you missed. You have to consider what the problem specification covers and allows, and think of those little cases on your own, given the specification. The judge input, again, will follow the specification as given in the problem. So if the bounds are up to 10 for an integer, you won't have 12, for example, but it can be anywhere within the allowed specification. So make sure you think through that. After that, if your answers are all matching and it looks good, you can still get an incorrect response if you're not following the proper format. Okay, so every problem will have a particular format, sometimes very simple, like outputting a number, but sometimes it might have a little header, like the answer is 5 or something, and you have to make sure you have that little header. Okay, and if you don't, or if you have the capitalization wrong or something, you can receive what's called incorrect output format. So the answers are there and correct. There's just something about the presentation of them that are not correct. So those are the 5 incorrect submissions you could potentially get in the competition this year. Okay, hopefully you just get them all correct the first time. All right, so again, before I wrap up, I want to give a reminder about how you can reach out to us on the days of the competition. So again, these are for technical problems only. If you have a clarification request about a problem, please submit those to the judges through the contest site, as we went over. But if you do need to reach out to us, you can email us at this address or chat with us during the Saturday rounds at this channel on this chat site. All right. And with that, I just want to wish everybody good luck, and we'll see you in the next round.